You know, some folks just never evolve, the groom's father said, swirling his champagne like he was toasting to his own reflection. Still clinging to their blue-collar pride, bless their hearts. Laughter followed. That kind of smug, nasal laughter that doesn't come from joy but from rot. I stood about 20 feet back from the main tables, near the catering tent, sipping a warm can of soda because apparently water wasn't elegant enough for the welcome toast. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. Then came the knife twist. That's just my husband. My wife chimed in with a theatrical sigh, loud enough to make sure every one of the 200 guests heard it. He insists on dressing like that. It's his thing. He thinks it's, like, principled or something. I turned slightly. She was already turning back toward her table, eyes locked on the CEO of the bride's sponsor firm, giving him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Like she was auditioning for a promotion. It was subtle, but her tone wasn't. She didn't mock me for what I wore. She mocked me for what she thought I was. I checked my phone, not out of boredom, but because I'd been waiting for this exact moment. The email had come in precisely 4 minutes earlier. Subject line, restructuring approval, sign-off complete. I wasn't going to cause a scene. That's not my style. I don't do shouting matches or dramatic exits. But I do believe in timing. And I don't believe in letting people walk off the cliff without at least a nudge. As the laughter died down and the music kicked back in, some instrumental version of Bruno Mars, because of course, I made my way toward the groom. He was dabbing sweat off his forehead with a monogrammed napkin and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I leaned in just enough for only him to hear. You might want to read this. I showed him my phone. Just one screen. Just one email. His eyes scanned it. First confused. Then stunned. Then afraid. The kind of fear that sinks into the chest and hollows a man out. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but nothing came. Then he turned. Fast. Almost knocked over a floral centerpiece in the process. He marched across the lawn to where his father, the same man who'd made the blue-collar crack, was still smiling, basking in the temporary spotlight. I watched the groom grab his arm and whisper something urgently. The father blinked. Twice. Then turned and looked straight at me. The smile fell off his face like wet plaster. Dad? The groom muttered, loud enough now for the surrounding guests to catch wind. His blue-collar job? He owns the company you work for. I didn't need to say a word. That's the thing about silence. It gets louder the longer it stretches. The tables closest to them turned first. Then others. Murmurs began rippling across the reception like wind through dry leaves. Some guests craned their necks. Some stood up, and some just stared at me. One woman, probably a second cousin twice removed, tilted her head and said, "Wait, is that true?" I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I just calmly walked back to the drink station and cracked open another warm soda. Tasted about the same as the first, flat, bitter, and fitting. You'd be amazed how fast someone can recalibrate their attitude when the man they just laughed at turns out to sign the checks that fund their lifestyle. But let's be clear, I wasn't there to flex. I was there because my wife insisted we show up for family. And now here we were, me in my work boots, and her in a borrowed identity she didn't realize was about to expire. Oh, and before I forget, if you're still listening and haven't subscribed, this is your moment. Most folks don't, and yet here we are giving you the inside track. It keeps the stories coming and, frankly, it tells our team this actually means something to people. Now, back to the scene unraveling like bad embroidery. My wife hadn't moved yet. She was frozen mid-conversation with the VP of Regional Development, laughing at some story I'm sure involved a yacht and a second mortgage. Then she noticed the shift. She noticed me. She noticed her new brother-in-law's meltdown. And for a second, her eyes locked on mine. Pure confusion. That look of someone who's realizing the ground isn't just shaky, it's missing entirely. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just turned back to the view beyond the estate. Vineyards stretching for miles, quiet hills, that weird little bee buzzing around the rim of my can. Because what they thought was the punchline. That was just the cold open. Gasps aren't supposed to sound like that. They weren't dramatic. They were quiet. That sharp intake of breath when people suddenly remember they've been saying the wrong name in the wrong room. I didn't need to turn around to know who they were looking at. I could feel it, like 1,000 tiny lasers slicing across my back. The groom's father was still standing there with his hand half raised, stuck mid-gesture. The champagne flute tilted, spilling a slow, sticky line of gold onto his tuxedo sleeve. He didn't notice. He was staring at me like I'd grown fangs. His wife leaned in toward him, her lips barely moving, probably trying to confirm what their son had just hissed in his ear. Her eyes darted toward me once, blinked like she could undo the frame. Like if she recalculated fast enough, this wouldn't be happening. I sat down. Slowly. No fanfare. No dramatic tug of the chair. Just folded myself back into my seat and took another sip of that lukewarm soda. One leg crossed casually over the other. I rested the can on my thigh, letting the condensation soak into my jeans. That's the thing about moments like these. You don't own them by raising your voice. You own them by not needing to. The bride, now visibly shaken, whispered something to the groom. He didn't answer right away. His hand was clenched tightly around his phone, knuckles white. Then he said something too low to hear, and she stiffened. Her eyes cut toward my wife, her older sister. That moment hung in the air like someone had just opened a door in a vacuum. Disbelief, betrayal, panic, all jostling for space behind her carefully painted face. I didn't look at my wife. Not yet, but I could sense the shift in her posture. She'd stopped laughing, stopped smiling. Something about the way she clutched the stem of her wine glass a little too tight, her knuckles going slightly pale. The realization hadn't hit her fully, but something in the room was off, and she could feel it in her bones. That's when I noticed him. Near the far edge of the reception, past the string quartet and the overpriced floral arch, stood Robert Gelman. Retired now, but formerly the senior VP of logistics for Hayworth Maritime. A man whose handshake once decided if you got a port contract or not. We'd crossed paths 15 years ago, negotiated a cross-state pipeline deal. He never forgot a face, and he was walking toward me. He moved slowly, deliberately, not saying a word until he reached my table. Then, without pretense, he extended his hand. Still wearing boots to weddings, I see, he said, low enough that only I could hear. I shook his hand. Still attending events you pretend to hate? He gave me a short chuckle. Then he leaned in and whispered something that made the edges of my mouth twitch. They're going to figure it out too late. He patted my shoulder once, then turned and left. No questions. No fanfare. Just a nod between men who'd both outlived the need to explain themselves. More murmurs now. I caught pieces. Was that Gelman? Wait, is he? But didn't she say he was retired? Eyes were darting. Conversations half finished. Everyone recalibrating. Still, my wife didn't move. She was trying to pin it together like shards of a broken mirror, reflections of something she didn't want to believe. Her expression was that of someone trying to remember a password under pressure. She wasn't sure what had just changed, but the social math wasn't adding up anymore. Across the lawn, the DJ asked the crowd to direct their attention to the buffet being served near the pergola. But barely anyone moved. Even the charcuterie couldn't compete with a real-time identity crisis. And me? I just adjusted my seat a little, letting the sun hit my shoulder, watching the way power reshapes a room without ever raising its voice. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was the moment before the moment. The moment where everyone starts to realize the party's over, but no one's told the band to stop playing. They say memory's a soft thing. Not mine. Mine is filed, color-coded, time-stamped, and sharpened like a box cutter. And as I sat there at that ridiculous vineyard wedding, watching my wife try to act like the floor wasn't disappearing beneath her heels, I found myself drifting back. Not out of nostalgia, but clarity. The first warehouse I ever ran was a corrugated steel box with no insulation and a manager who thought a spreadsheet was witchcraft. I was 23. No fancy degree. Just grit, a clipboard, and a bad back that still clicks when I stand too fast. By the time I turned 37, I wasn't running that warehouse anymore. I was running the company. Then the next one. And the next. 22 years of supply chain, mergers, infrastructure deals, union negotiations, sleepless nights, and cutthroat boardroom brawls that never made the press. I didn't wear tailored suits or sit on glossy magazine covers. I was the kind of rich that doesn't scream. It whispers through freight contracts and rail lines. I retired at 45. That's what the paperwork said, anyway. What I really did was disappear. Shifted operations offshore, then moved equity under a quiet Delaware trust. One of those generic names, Tideview Consolidated. That sounds like an HOA or a failed tech startup. Boring on purpose. I wanted silence. I'd had enough of boardrooms with too much cologne and too little character. Then I met Evelyn. She liked that I wasn't flashy. Said I felt stable. A word women like when they're tired of men who cry at TED Talks and forget to check the oil. We moved in together fast. She asked what I did, and I told her the truth. Retired. Early. That was enough for her. She didn't probe. Didn't ask. I guess because that answer made her feel like the star. Like she'd landed someone who'd plateaued while she was still climbing. Blue-collar charm. She once called it at a dinner party, laughing as if I'd brought a lunch pail to the table. He's an old soul. Still reads paper invoices. What she never noticed was the second phone I kept. Not a burner, Nothing shady. Just a work line. Quiet, clean, encrypted. From that phone, I managed 6 logistics companies under shell names, ran monthly ops briefs with site managers in 3 states, and held quarterly calls with foreign partners who never even saw my real name. I didn't need the attention. I didn't even need the money anymore. What I needed was control, and watching it all grow from the shadows. That was control. Every Christmas, I signed off on 6-figure vendor contracts before anyone else in the family had even finished arguing over who'd host Easter. While Evelyn posted photos of our matching sweaters and made jokes about my simple life, I was finalizing a 3-terminal expansion with a port in Savannah. She'd never seen a single document, never asked where the occasional check came from when I offered to cover her sister's college tuition. Old investments, I'd say, and she believed it. Not because I lied, but because she wanted the version of me that made her feel superior. The man who didn't understand how to use Venmo. The man who still brought a lunch cooler to golf outings. She once told her sister I was dependable, like a Subaru. I was the damn dealership. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if she'd ever really looked at me. Asked why I still woke up at 5:15 a.m. even on Sundays. Why I read cargo manifests over coffee. Why I never quite let go of that second phone. But she didn't. Because acknowledging what I was would have made her reflect on what she wasn't. And that's the part people always miss. I never hid. She just chose not to see. Because the truth doesn't knock. It waits, quietly, in the next room, behind a door you pretend doesn't exist. Until it opens itself. Back at the reception, the temperature had shifted, but not the kind that comes from sunset or a faulty heater. It was the kind of cold that settles into a room when everyone starts rethinking the last 2 hours of their life. The laughter had dulled. The band played softer now, like even the cello was afraid to draw too much attention. I was by the edge of the courtyard, pretending to read the label on the soda can again, when I saw him approaching. Robert Castillo, CEO of West Pine Freight, one of our mid-tier vendors. He'd been trying to renegotiate fuel surcharge terms with one of our subsidiaries for months. Didn't know you were related to the family, he said as he reached me, offering a cautious handshake. I met his hand. Firm. No grin. Just a neutral grip. Not for long, I replied. That sentence seemed to hit harder than expected. His mouth opened slightly like he had a follow-up, but he didn't say it. Instead, he gave me the same look I'd seen in boardrooms for years, the one that says, I just realized I've been speaking to the wrong person this whole time. He stepped aside, but then another figure walked up. Janine Clowers, head of regional operations for Caldwell Hart. She shook my hand with both of hers like I'd just cured her cancer. No small talk. Just gratitude disguised as etiquette. I should have connected the dots, she said quietly. This whole setup, brilliant. I gave her the kind of nod that doesn't confirm anything but doesn't deny it either. It's the nod of a man who's stopped needing to introduce himself because the room's already catching up. One by one they came. A logistics broker from Chicago. A coastal real estate developer. Someone's uncle who used to do customs law, but now just stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. These weren't the country club crowd my wife paraded in front of for Instagram likes. These were the operators. The ones who knew power didn't come with a golf handicap. It came with leverage. And each of them approached not out of politeness, but recognition. Quiet, reverent, strategic recognition. And then, her. Evelyn. I saw her the moment she noticed. It was like watching a glitch in a video game. The frozen smile, the recalculating eyes, the way she started moving before she had anywhere to go. Her wine glass was suddenly gone, traded for that bright white clutch she always pretended was vintage, but still had the tags inside. She began walking toward me. Not too fast, not a panic pace, but with that rigid posture she used when trying to look in control. Chin high, shoulders tight, eyes flicking toward anyone watching, trying to gauge how far things had slipped. As she closed the distance, I turned slightly to the left, deliberate, and engaged Robert Castillo again. Let's talk Monday, I said, just loud enough for her to hear. Restructuring might impact your side. He stiffened, nodded fast, and pulled out his phone to type something in. Calendar entry, no doubt. Maybe a prayer request. Evelyn stopped mid-step, half a dozen feet from me. She smiled, tight, confused, like someone trying to remember how to flirt with a stranger. Everything okay? She asked, the pitch of her voice higher than usual. I didn't answer. I just met her gaze. Held it. No anger. No sarcasm. Just the unbearable calm of someone who sees you. Not as you wish to be seen, but as you are. She took a half step forward. Can we talk? I turned back to Castillo without a word. Monday, I repeated. I want a full operations brief. Yes, absolutely, he nodded, already sweating. By the time I looked back, she'd frozen again. That was the first moment she looked small to me. Not physically, not even emotionally, just unmoored. Like a spotlight had gone out, and the stage was suddenly too big for one person. Behind her, I caught the bride watching. Eyes wide, jaw slightly dropped. Her groom was whispering again, probably filling in blanks she never thought needed filling. Somewhere between the string lights and the Chardonnay, the myth of Evelyn had cracked. Not shattered. Not yet. But the crowd wasn't orbiting her anymore. They were pivoting, and she knew it. The email I showed the groom was short. 6 sentences, no attachments, no legalese. The kind of message a manager might glance over with a sigh, then forward to HR to handle it. Except this one had a subject line that would ruin a man's legacy before dessert was served. Subject, termination approval, effective immediately. From HR Director, North River Operations. To Board Chair, Tideview Consolidated. CC, Legal Affairs, Payroll Processing. Content, as requested, per findings from Q2 audit. We are executing the separation of Ronald K. H. Effective immediately. Final payout per policy. NDA enforcement required. Signed, Carolyn Blake, VP of HR. No fireworks. No dramatic language. Just the quiet sound of a trap closing. Ronald, dear old Ron, had been skimming. Nothing obvious. Nothing that screamed fraud on first glance. But 6 months ago, a dormant contract from a 2014 partnership popped up in our quarterly vendor audit. It still showed small, recurring consulting payments. Curious, considering that partner company no longer existed. The amounts were minor. Just enough to avoid scrutiny. Just enough to look like line noise to someone who wasn't looking closely. But I was. And I noticed that Ron had consulted on the contract's extension with himself. That audit hit my desk 2 months ago. I didn't act immediately. I marked it, filed it, let it sit like meat in a smoker. See, it's not just about what you do with a betrayal like that. It's when you light the match. Originally, Ron's termination was scheduled for next Friday. Clean sweep, HR escort, final check in a beige envelope, maybe a teary lunch with some middle manager who still thought he mattered. But then the wedding invitation came. Evelyn begged me to go. Said it would be good optics if we supported her sister. Said Ron was harmless. Said I'd blend in better if I wore that plaid shirt she liked, the one she always called working man camouflage at her charity brunches. So I moved the termination up, not out of pettiness, not even for revenge. I moved it up because it was time Ron's world caught up with the truth, and because I knew exactly when it would hurt the most. The groom had no idea. Poor kid. Thought his father was just another good OL boy who'd clawed his way up the corporate ladder. He didn't know his dad had been selling off scraps of his own integrity to cover private golf lessons and wine tastings that he bragged about on Facebook. He didn't know his father had been slowly burning his reputation behind his back. And when he read that email on my phone, when his eyes landed on my name at the bottom, under the board's approval, he understood. Not just the termination, not just the fraud. He understood that I had known. For months. Quietly. And that I had waited for this moment, this exact minute, with 200 guests watching and a $14,000 wedding cake sweating in the sun. And Evelyn, still standing by the gift table, oblivious, still trying to pretend the social dynamic hadn't inverted. Ron's hands were shaking as he grabbed his son's shoulder. I couldn't hear what he said, maybe nothing. Maybe he was just begging with his eyes. But the groom's face was a wall now. Cold. Set. I didn't look away. Didn't blink. You see, some people like to make noise when they win. They gloat. They post photos with captions like, "Success tastes better when they said you couldn't." But me? I just reassign the calendar event, sign the dotted line, and make sure the moment is never forgotten. Because this wasn't a spike. It was the first domino. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the framed print of Lake Tahoe in the hallway. It tilted left, just slightly, like it too had been knocked off balance by the night. Evelyn stormed in, heels clacking against the oak floors we'd installed together 5 years ago during her rustic minimalist phase. She still had on the same dress from the wedding, but her makeup had started to run at the corners. The mask was slipping. "What the hell was that?" she snapped, dropping her clutch on the bench and glaring at me like I'd crashed the Titanic into her brunch reservation. I didn't answer immediately, just walked into the kitchen, unbuttoning my jacket one slow movement at a time. She followed me like an accusation. "Seriously, what game are you playing, making me look like an idiot in front of my family?" I tossed the jacket over a chair, opened the fridge, and pulled out a bottle of water. Took a sip, turned toward her. "I own Harbor North," I said flatly, "and 5 subsidiaries." Her mouth opened, but no sound came. I watched her chest rise, then fall, then rise again like she was trying to find the air to fight back. Since when? She finally managed, blinking like someone trying to come back from anesthesia. Since before I met you. She stared, unblinking. I used to run operations. Bought out my shares after I retired. Shifted everything under Tideview Trust. That name doesn't mean anything to most people, which is exactly why I used it. You never said anything. I nodded. No, I didn't. Her arms folded. Why would you keep something like that from me? I shrugged. You never asked. She gaped at me like I'd grown a second head. You told me you were retired. That you just liked keeping things simple. I did, I said. I do. But simple doesn't mean small. And it doesn't mean stupid. Her hands were shaking now. She picked up the clutch again, then put it down, then picked it up again, like it might give her a better grip on reality. Is this why all those men were coming up to you at the reception? She asked, voice cracking slightly. Why Janine Clowers was practically bowing at your feet. I said nothing. She stepped closer, voice dropping. Why didn't you tell me, Tom? I met her eyes. Because you mocked me, I said. In front of 200 people. Her lips parted. She blinked. Once. Twice. And not just tonight, I added. For years. You told your friends I was quirky, that I had blue-collar baggage. You smiled when they joked about how I wore boots to dinner parties. You called it endearing. But what you meant was beneath you. She stood still, shoulders trembling under the weight of something heavier than embarrassment. And you let them believe it, I continued. Because it made you feel taller. Made you feel like you'd married someone safe. Someone who wouldn't cast a shadow over your little wine tastings and yoga retreats. That's not fair, she whispered. It's accurate, I replied. You didn't want to know who I was. You wanted someone who looked good in the background of your curated life. She shook her head. No, I raised a hand. Not in anger, just to stop the spin. I'm not angry, Evelyn. I'm just done pretending you ever really saw me. She dropped her clutch again. This time it stayed on the floor. We stood in silence for a long time. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but full. The silence of a marriage that had been living on a story, one carefully written by her, edited by convenience, and published without fact-checking. I walked past her and up the stairs, not looking back. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't yell. I just left her there in the foyer, standing among all the curated furniture and color-coordinated throw pillows she once said felt like us. Because maybe they did. But I don't think either of us ever stopped to ask what us was really built on. 2 days later, just after 8 a.m., my phone rang. Not the work line, the personal one. The one nobody uses unless it's serious. I let it buzz twice before picking up. Tom, the voice said, tentative, hollow. It was the groom. I said nothing, just waited. Sometimes silence tells you more than questions ever could. I ended it. He said finally, voice flat, but not broken. The wedding's off. Or postponed. Indefinitely. A long exhale followed, the kind that scrapes its way out of a man who's been pretending to sleep while the world burns around him. I went home that night and just sat in the garage, he said. Didn't even go inside. Just stared at the back wall like it had answers. Still I said nothing. I could hear it coming. The thing he was really calling to say. Your email, it showed me everything, he continued. Not just the layoff. Not just the fraud. But who he really was. Who I was about to become. He paused, like he had to ask permission to keep speaking. I didn't grant it. I didn't deny it. He told me it was a clerical error, he said quietly. Said it was nothing. That HR was overreaching. But then I saw the payment trail. The contract dates. The fake sign-off from a dead subsidiary. You really don't realize how deep someone's rot goes until you peel back the floorboards. I heard a door close on his end. A car door maybe. His voice dropped. And your wife? He added, bitter now. She told my fiancé last month that you were just some truck manager with retirement money. Said you wore boots because you didn't know how to wear anything else. Said you were lucky to land someone like her. He laughed once. The humorless kind. Like gravel tossed against concrete. My fiancé said it was weird. Even back then, he added. Said Evelyn sounded like she was trying to make herself bigger by making you smaller. She was, I replied, finally speaking. That single sentence held more weight than a speech ever could. And you knew? He asked. About my dad? I knew, I said. And I waited. A pause. Why? I let the question hang. Because sometimes people need to sit in the wreckage a little longer before they realize who actually lit the match. You ever see a freight derail? I asked instead. He hesitated. No. It doesn't happen fast. You hear the steel groan. You feel it long before the cars start flipping. That's what this was. Your father derailed years ago. Everyone just ignored the noise. There was nothing but breathing on the line after that. Then finally, he spoke again. And this time, it was business. My legal team's pulling old contracts, he said. Going through his expense approvals, vendor logs, even company card records. I don't want to just postpone the wedding. I want a clean house before anything starts again. Good. The boy was growing teeth. And if you don't mind, he added, voice steadier now, I'd like to keep your email. Not just for legal. For me. To remind me what I almost stepped into. I didn't say yes. Didn't need to. We both understood what that meant. He was no longer calling as the groom. He was calling as a man who'd finally opened his eyes and wasn't liking what he saw. You'll be fine, I said. But don't just tear it down. Build something better. Yeah, he said. I think I finally get what that means. As he hung up, I stared out the window of my study, watching a small convoy of trucks move down the highway in the distance. Black cabs, orange trim. One of my fleets. Funny. Evelyn used to call them your little Tonka toys. I wonder what she'd call them now. Because the collateral damage had just begun, and the first alliance to fall wasn't even mine. The first blog post went live 48 hours after the call. At 6:07 a.m., a site best known for covering local gala circuits and wine-fueled charity board appointments posted an article titled, Regional Wedding Erupts Over Secret CEO Identity. Under it, a blurry but unmistakable photo. Me, standing at the reception's edge, flanked by two regional logistics heads. My face half-turned, sunglasses on, soda in hand. Captioned, the mysterious guest shaking hands with executives may not be so mysterious after all. The second headline came by noon. Groom's father terminated for fraud, wedding postponed amid identity revelation. And that was when the vultures started circling. Evelyn saw it first. Her phone buzzed nonstop from the moment she stepped into the kitchen. I could hear it from my study. Dings, vibrations, rapid footsteps across tile. She didn't say anything for the first few hours. But by afternoon, she cracked. I need to talk to you, she called from the doorway, holding her phone like it had betrayed her personally. I didn't look up from the folder I was reading. Then talk. She stepped in, waving her screen like a white flag. They're spinning it all wrong. It makes me look like some shallow social climber. Do they? I murmured, flipping a page. I didn't know you were, she started, then stopped herself. She didn't want to repeat what she'd said to her sister's fiancé, because we both knew what she'd called me. Can we issue a statement? She asked instead. Something neutral, just to clarify. Clarify what? That it was a misunderstanding, she said, too quickly. That you're a private man, and I just never asked because you were so humble about it. Humble, I repeated. Is that the word your PR firm gave you? She didn't answer, just stood there, breathing through her teeth, waiting for me to throw her a lifeline. I didn't. The next day, she tried to control the narrative. Released a 2-sentence clarification on her Instagram story. White background, black serif font, like all the self-inflicted celebrities do it. The events at my sister's wedding were a private misunderstanding. Out of respect for all parties, we asked for privacy during this time. It didn't work. Someone on the vendor side, probably tired of being ignored for years, posted a quote under a LinkedIn post that afternoon. Some partnerships require courage. Others require accountability. We thank Mr. W for preserving the integrity of a strained agreement and for reminding us that some leaders don't need titles to lead. Long overdue changes are coming. That's all it took. The story spread, faster than expected. Within 24 hours, a quiet logistics blog ran a piece titled, The Ghost Owner of Harbor North, Behind the Boots. They'd done their homework, dug through filings, connected Tideview Consolidated to Harbor North, then to North River Supply, then to Cross Creek Rail, and on through every subsidiary like a domino trail catching fire. And then, someone posted the clip. It was only 22 seconds long, caught on a phone by a groomsman who fancied himself a wedding videographer. The toast, the laughter, Ron's voice saying, still clinging to their blue-collar pride, followed by Evelyn, grinning beside him, chiming in, that's just my husband. He insists on dressing like that. Those 22 seconds would live on in every commentary video, every business podcast that tried to spin the story into a masterclass on strategic identity management. She tried to bury it, hired 2 PR firms, tried issuing a second clarification, this time longer, with phrases like lack of context, and meant playfully. One of them even had the audacity to refer to me as a man of humble origins, which made me laugh out loud. It all backfired, because people weren't laughing with her anymore. They were dissecting her, judging her, replaying the video on loop, comparing it to years of curated brunch photos and humble brag captions about grateful for my rock. Meanwhile, I remained silent. I didn't comment, didn't like any posts, didn't give interviews, but others did. An investor from our Q1 round quoted the incident in a keynote speech. In a world of smoke and noise, true leadership is often found in the shadows, until the moment it chooses to step into the light. The world was shifting, and Evelyn was still trying to play by the old rules. She used to believe control was about appearances. But the thing about appearances? Once they crack, the truth doesn't just leak out. It floods. She sat across from her attorney like someone who thought she was entering a boutique to order a customized exit. High-rise office, neutral beige walls, fresh orchids by the window. She'd dressed the part too. Dark blazer, pearl earrings, a perfectly poised posture that screamed, "Let's make this quick. I already know I'm going to win." She thought she was about to negotiate a payout. Her voice was smooth, crisp. "He blindsided me. Humiliated me in front of everyone I know. We need to talk spousal support, property division, access to shared accounts." The lawyer, a woman in her mid-50s with steel-rimmed glasses and a quiet wariness, held up a hand. "Let's start with the prenup." Evelyn waved a dismissive hand. "Please. That thing's ancient. He said it was just a formality when we signed it. We were in Cabo. It wasn't even notarized in California. It was..." Her smile faltered. "What?" "It was notarized in both states. Filed and recorded." His attorney filed updates twice, once after the house purchase, once after the sale of Harbor North stock options. That wiped the rest of the smirk off her face. The lawyer flipped through the printed pages, tapping her finger near the middle of one section. "Here." Evelyn leaned forward, reading silently. Her brow furrowed. Clause 14. Be in the event of public disparagement, verbal, written, or published, by either party resulting in quantifiable reputational damage or financial loss to the other party, full asset reversion will be triggered. She blinked. What does that even mean? The lawyer didn't answer. She just turned the iPad on the table toward Evelyn. A paused video. Low quality. Slightly tilted. But clear audio. Ron, during the toast, still clinging to their blue-collar pride. Then Evelyn's voice, laughing. "That's just my husband. He insists on dressing like that." Another voice, off camera, laughs and says, "Is he, like, allergic to money?" Then Evelyn, smiling wide, lifts her glass. "He thinks driving a beat-up Tacoma makes him deep. I call it cosplaying poverty." The lawyer paused the video. "That joke," she said quietly, recorded by 2 guests, posted on Instagram and TikTok. Combined, 3.2 million views. 42 news blogs referenced it. 3 trade journals republished it in the context of corporate leadership analysis. 4 vendors cited it in internal morale reports. 1 international partner delayed renewal pending reputation review. Evelyn looked stunned. "But I didn't mean it like that. It was a joke. People make jokes." "They do," the lawyer replied. "But your prenup defines damage by outcome, not intent." Evelyn stared at the clause again, mouth parted. "And because of this, I get what?" The lawyer flipped to the next page. "Nothing." The word hit harder than any of the headlines had. "Wait, no, wait. That's not possible. He can't just leave me with nothing." "Not only is it possible," the lawyer said calmly, "it's ironclad. He had your father's firm review it before the wedding. Your father signed off on it." Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. "Why would my dad agree to this?" "Because," the lawyer said, pushing her chair back slightly. "At the time, he thought your husband was a small-time ex-warehouse manager with a modest inheritance. Not the man who controlled 6 logistics companies." Silence. Evelyn's eyes darted across the page again, searching for a loophole, a typo, a footnote, anything. "Can't we argue coercion?" she whispered. "You'd have to prove it," the lawyer said. "And he has 6 emails from you calling the prenup a cute safety net. One of them includes a smiley face." Her voice was shrinking now. "I didn't know it meant this." "That's the point, Evelyn," the lawyer said, voice softening just enough to be cruel. "You never cared to find out what anything meant, until it started costing you." She stood up too fast, knocking her chair against the wall. Grabbing her phone, she began pacing the office like a signal would appear and rescue her. But no one called. No lifeline came. The empire she thought she'd climbed into had always been scaffolding, propped up by a man she never bothered to really understand. And now, she was free-falling, with nothing to grab onto. The ballroom was filled with suits that cost more than most mortgages. Polished wood, gold leaf accents, LED spotlights beaming down on a sleek black stage. A massive screen behind the podium displayed a single line in white serif text. "The ghost who built this industry." I stood off stage alone. No entourage, no assistant. Just me in the same style boots I wore to that wedding, only newer, cleaner. The badge around my neck read, T.W. Chairman, Tide View Consolidated. The MC, a slick man with perfectly combed hair and a voice trained for TED Talks, stepped to the mic. Please welcome the anonymous powerhouse behind 6 major logistics firms, a man whose influence you felt, even if you never knew his name. Mr. Thomas Whitaker. Polite applause. A few scattered murmurs as people connected the dots. Faces I recognized from contracts, audits, boardroom buyouts. This time, they knew who they were looking at. I stepped into the light. Across town, in a 2-bedroom condo with beige carpets and peeling laminate counters, Evelyn watched the live stream on her iPad. Alone. No guest list, no wine glass, no curated background. Just a borrowed folding chair and the silence of a room that didn't know how to echo. She looked smaller on that screen than she ever did in real life. Legs folded tight, a blanket over her lap despite the spring heat. Her phone sat face up next to her. She stared at it for a long time, thumbs hovering. Then she typed. I made a mistake. 3 words. No emoji. No punctuation. Just raw, pathetic honesty. The kind that only arrives after you've lost the power to spin it. The message delivered. It didn't matter. I never saw it. Or maybe I did. But by then, I was already at the podium. I nodded once to the room. Took a breath. The microphone buzzed softly. Sometimes, I began, respect isn't demanded. It's withheld. Until the world sees why. Silence. Then stillness. There are moments when a room doesn't applaud because it's too busy listening. I spoke for 10 minutes. I didn't mention the wedding. Or my ex-wife. Or her family. I didn't need to. Every person in that room had already read the articles, shared the clips, passed the rumors in half-whispers at industry dinners. They already knew. I spoke about ownership. About humility. About silence as a tool, not of weakness, but of patience. About building things no one claps for, until they realize they're standing on it. Afterward, I shook hands with 2 senators, 3 CEOs, and the chairman of the state's infrastructure board. Photos were taken. Newsrooms published headlines that read like redemption arcs, except no one had known I was lost to begin with. Back in that condo, Evelyn waited. She refreshed the screen, watched the room rise in standing ovation. No one clapped for her. She checked her phone again. No reply. Just the little gray delivered status, mocking her like a tombstone. And then, nothing. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because some lessons don't arrive in raised voices or slammed doors. Some lessons arrive in silence and stay there